Greetings all. Well, as you know on this channel, we always stick to science, mathematics, ethics, data. And we've got a great summary today because this mask issue has been talked about for many years and we've had mandates and all that kind of stuff. And we've shown again and again the data precludes any of those mandates. The data suggests strongly or effectively proves there's no beneficial effect. But now we have Cochrane collaboration in January 23, just out, massive review, and we're going to go through the details. So this video, share it with your friends who are still concerned or wondering about this topic, and it will close the case for them, I assure you. So here we go. So I'm happy in my splash screen, and I guess that might be because we've been proven utterly correct on everything. Let's have a look. So a long time back I shared this paper and others showing there was no scientific evidence supporting the use of masks for aerosol-borne pathogens like influenza or indeed coronavirus, same kind of mechanisms. And we showed that the mask mandates were brought in ironically after the seasonal hump was over. So that kind of shows some kind of malice of intent perhaps. But of course when the mandatory masks were brought in, there was no change to the curve whatsoever. And this was Germany. We could see it in Austria also, in Poland, and all over the world we saw that masks made no real world difference. So there's that. And we have these classics like mask mandate versus non-mandated countries, the overall cases per 100k per day, and zero real world difference seen. And the classic North versus South Dakota. Both have same number of people approx, same culture, same regionality, seasonality. No masks or business restrictions in South, and North masks and business restrictions. No difference. So we've seen this all over the world, hundreds of papers. It's a closed case. However, let's look at the latest publication from Cochrane Collaborations, and they looked at over 500,000 participants in 11 new randomized control trials and cluster RCTs, and they brought the total number of randomized control trials to 78. And RCTs are the only way you can prove anything in science, so the data that's associational that's being thrown out to support masks is basically dog dirt. And it doesn't really show anything anyway, except what I've already shown you, that there is no signal. So these are RCTs, and their findings basically are that there's no risk ratio related to medical surgical masks compared to no masks. That's the bottom line. Risk ratio, no result. There is no effect. And they checked N95P2 respirators compared to the medical and surgical masks. And again, their conclusion was stark. There is no signal there in randomized control trials. So it's over, guys. They said the risk of bias was high for the RCTs, and you know which way that bias would have been going, right? To find a result. That's what everyone wants with an RCT. So they were biased to get results, and still they got nothing. So there you have it. And they also said that the harms were never really looked at. And that's another shocking thing, that no one ever quantified the harms. They just went gunning to find a benefit and did not find it. So masks are junk science. There is no escaping this with 78 RCTs and all of the real world associational data. The case is closed. So please do share this with any of your friends or relations who are still delusional. It was a political move. It had zero to do with science. But we look at some of their plots here, and I think to people who are familiar with these, if your results are coming down the middle line, there is no effect. And if they're overlapping the middle line, there is no scientific effect. And you can see here the results are all over the place, averaging with no effect. So masks, without question, scientifically using the scientific method, are junk science. And here is the N95s compared to the medical surgical masks. The last one was masks versus none. And again, absolute shotgun plot, no result. Masks, no effect in real world or in RCT. They are junk science. There is no escaping this. And they also had N95 compared just for the healthcare workers. Oh, well, those guys, you'll see an effect even if you don't see it in the population. No, nothing. The science is in, the case is closed. Mask science is junk science. So it is actually tyranny, because unscientific measures taken against the population by mandate, forcing you to cover your face like a slave, unless there's massive science supporting that, and there's zero, it's clear, it's tyranny. So that's what you got, political tyranny. Now, 2011, I'll just mention, Cochrane started looking at this topic long before COVID, and their conclusion was, forget about it. No evidence worth a toss to support masks. That was it in 2011. And we have loads of studies and RCTs showing the same thing for aerosol pathogen spread. They also noted that screening and all that kind of stuff, and separation of a meter and all that stuff, had no evidence whatsoever either in 2011. Why did we forget? Masks are junk science. It's over. 2020, they updated and again found the same thing, but firmed it up solidly. There is no effect. Confidence interval 0.82 to 1.18. No effect, right? That's it. Junk science. There is no coming back from this, and to be quite honest, there never was. 2021, the last one I'll feature is Denmark. Now, they got the result that there was no statistically significant effect, and it was an RCT involving COVID-2. Yeah, not just influenza, but they are the same. Masks will apply to both equally, or not apply, as the case may be. So they couldn't get published because their results showed no effect, and politically, masks were being brought in with mandates, prison sentences and fines with zero science. So the last thing anyone wanted was a trial, first one, that showed there was no benefit. But they did, and they couldn't get published. And after a couple of months, they changed their wording to keep the publishers happy and kind of said, well, look, there's no effect, but maybe there might be an effect. I'm not joking. No effect in the RCT, and their wording still kind of said maybe there is a benefit, yada, yada, yada. So that's it. So the whole thing is utterly corrupt. Masks are junk science. Again, I don't like stating things unequivocally in anything scientific, but here with 78 studies and loads more real-world data, you can state it clear as day. Masks are junk science. That will never change. If you do 1,000 more studies, it will never change. That's it, folks. And I'll just remind you what was at stake. Well, here's the Irish government database after 2 full seasons and massive positivity. So SARS-CoV-2 was everywhere, right? The world and its mother pretty much caught it. And for under 70s as a group, the actual risk was 0.014% for mortality, and that's with the positive PCR, and not necessarily from. So that was 1 in 7,500, around the risk of poisoning from US data. Under 50s as a group, 1 in 50,000 risk of death with 28 days of a positive PCR. Risk of death from fire or smoke from US tables. And under 25s, less than 5 dying. They wouldn't give us the number. But if you guess 3, and it's probably 0, 1 in 500,000 risk, a quarter the risk from falling downstairs or step ladders. And remember, this is with PCR. Excess mortality shows an even shockingly lower kind of number. So that's what it was all for, all of this anti-science, which really makes it absolute tyranny to foist this nonsense on a gullible public. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen. And you know what? In the last few years, there's been a lot of craziness. And by the way, all of what I've said today applies to lockdowns too. There's a similar vast gathering of data and papers showing there's no real measurable effect. But we need to keep reminding ourselves of this, because the lockdowns and the masks and the disruption they caused was the basis for all of the subsequent madness that occurred in this crazy period in our lifetimes. So we always got to keep reminding people that this is the case, that the whole thing was essentially an unethical, unscientific kind of psychosis fest that was foisted upon us. We can never forget that, because many more bad things will be coming down the road if they can get away with nonsense at this level. As always, thanks so much to my Patreon supporters and PayPal supporters. Really appreciate you enabling me to continue to get the actual science out there, the actual data, the inferences, and to counter the misinformation and disinformation of legacy media, which at this stage has become a farce. So we need to keep focusing on looking back on the viral kind of pandemic period and reiterating truthfully and factually that the vast majority of measures and things that were done were unethical, unscientific, and kind of outrageous when you look back at it. So we need to keep reminding people of this. We need to keep focusing on this. But I will be getting more into climate science in the coming months. And I will, of course, be continuing to focus on metabolic health, again, countering misinformation, disinformation, and focusing on maximizing population health and resilience. So thanks so much for your support, and anyone else who can jump on board and give a little support, super appreciated.